What is the relationship between stress and substance abuse? I'm a licensed mental health and addiction professional, and I'm going to break down how stress greatly impacts our body and our overall mental health. Also, in this video, we're going to cover some of the differences between problematic substance use that's brought on by stress and chronic addiction. We're going to talk about how the pandemic uniquely affected the mental health and substance abuse of millions of people. This is truly a case study in how stress impacts our overall well-being. And in the end, we're going to talk about some of the solutions you can employ to decrease your stress and how mental health professionals can help. First of all, what is the definition of stress? Essentially, it is your body's reaction to either mental, physical, or emotional pressure. One of the main ways our bodies respond to stress is the release of cortisol and adrenaline. These are both stress hormones that kick into high gear when your body feels like it's in threat. It's important to understand that this response is very helpful in the short term. It gives your body more of an ability to get out of danger quickly. However, it's important to understand that repeated exposure of these stress hormones over time wreaks havoc on your body. It affects literally everything. It's associated with almost every negative health outcome and a great predictor of early mortality. When it comes to substance use, whether it's the early stages of addiction or chronic use, we consider this a maladaptive coping mechanism. Essentially, it's something that makes you feel better immediately. However, over the long term, there are consequences that negatively impact your life. Substance use is just one way that people deal with mental health. It could be overeating, restricting your food intake, self-harm, shopping, gambling. These are all unhealthy ways that people cope with stress. Let's break down stress-related substance use into two categories: stress of the present and stress of the past. When it comes to addiction, one of the greatest predictors is adverse early childhood experiences. When we're children, our brains are malleable and developing quickly. Stressful experiences like abuse and neglect profoundly impact one's ability to regulate themselves emotionally and develop cognitively. This could lead to a variety of different outcomes, whether it be learning disabilities, attention difficulties, sleep problems, poor social skills, and low self-esteem. When we're experiencing any of these negative feelings or stress, addiction seems like a great solution. I compare it to a hammer because it seems like it could work for everything. When you have only a hammer, everything looks like a nail. However, when you overuse that hammer, it causes damage to everything around it. The good thing about substances is they kill emotional and physical pain right away. However, this leads to a cycle of dependence where you need more and more to get that desired effect while consequences keep rising. The cycle of dependence is like living life on payday loans. You get that money immediately, but eventually you have to pay that back with interest, and essentially that's withdrawal, where you need more and more of the substance to feel physically okay. In the immediate, it's easier to take out loans to get money than to work. However, in this metaphor, working is developing coping skills to deal with life, and we're going to talk about these toward the end of the video. At the end of the day, no matter where your stress comes from, if you feel like crap, you're going to be more tempted to use some of these short-term coping mechanisms and not really think about what the consequences are going to be later. The pandemic has truly been a case study in how stress impacts our mental health, whether it be from financial ruin, fear of catching the virus, grief and loss, isolation, or not being able to participate in the activities we once loved. The stress of the pandemic led to so many negative outcomes, especially when it comes to addiction, whether it be a 30% increase in overdoses hitting their highest point ever, liquor sales were higher than they'd ever been, about 15% of people reported drinking more than they did before, but you also had things like overeating and people reporting that their overall mental health was way worse than before. As a therapist, there were more referrals than ever during the time of the pandemic, and this was especially true for young people who felt especially isolated. Well, that was a lot about the problem, but what can we do to cope with stress and decrease the need for us to find these quick solutions that cause problems later? As therapists, one of our goals is to teach you skills on how to cope with stress and negative emotions. Also in therapy, I work with my clients to take inventory on their lives to find out where are they experiencing stress, whether it's at work, in the relationships, and how can we deal with those areas to overall feel better about your life. We also work to address that stress from the past, those negative life experiences that still affect you today. We process where those come from and work to heal so you feel better in the present. When you address these underlying issues, it greatly improves your ability to cope with mental health and stress. You no longer feel that same need to cope with short-term and damaging solutions. We're all human beings and we have our weaknesses, and when we're coping with stress, we like to pick our poisons of what helps us feel better in the short term. So please leave a comment. Tell me how you cope with stress, whether it's healthy or not.